Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
Cody sent me a note about a story out of Iowa. And I've had people ask me a lot of variations on a question like this. And that is what happens when there's different laws in states you visit compared to the state you live in. People often ask me about this with respect to cars. Tinted windows are legal in your state, but you drive into a state where they're not, for instance. But here the example we're going to talk about is a medical marijuana card that you got legally in one state. And you go to another state and you've brought your medicine with you. And if in that state there's no such thing as a medical marijuana card or that type of card or some other rules, the question then is, can you get in trouble in the state you're visiting even though it would be legal in the state you're from? And Iowa says, no, that is not legal. And that's from the Iowa Supreme Court. Arizona medical marijuana card does not allow a woman to possess drug in Iowa, according to the state Supreme Court there. William Morris wrote this for the Des Moines Register. An Arizona woman's medical marijuana card does not permit her to possess the drug in Iowa, even though she had to obtain a doctor's authorization to have it. And this is from a very close call in the Iowa Supreme Court. 7 justices, they voted 4-3. 4-3. So it could have just as easily gone the other way, but it didn't. The decision leaves in place a conviction for possession, which is a serious misdemeanor, for the woman and sets a precedent for other people arrested in Iowa for drug use or possession that may have been legal in their state of residence if that's where they were. Problem is, you ain't there. You're in Iowa. Chief Justice Susan Christensen wrote for the majority, while Justice Edward Mansfield wrote a dissent. According to the court filings, the woman was stopped for speeding while driving through Warren County in December of 2019, and the officer said he smelled marijuana. She then said, well, I've got osteoarthritis and some other painful musculoskeletal conditions, and therefore I do actually have marijuana, but I've not smoked it in a while. So she said she had some with her, but she was not partaking of it at that moment in time. She then showed the police officer a medical marijuana registry card that she was given in Arizona. And in Arizona, those are issued by the Department of Health Services. She got that in 2018. Prosecutors charged her with possession, and she was convicted at trial. And this is the tricky part. The court ruled that she could not present evidence about her medical marijuana card at all. And so one of the interesting things about cases like this is that ruling requires the courts to be thinking the way the Supreme Court eventually did, but they had not thought that way yet, at least not out loud. And so a lot of people would say, wait, it's one thing to let her argue it and watch her lose, but to even say she can't argue it at all. And this is one of those situations where in a pretrial motion, someone's going to bring this up, and the prosecutor, and say, we don't even want her to be able to tell the jury this because they're going to say it's not legal in Iowa, so why would it matter? Now, the interesting thing, of course, is that it would go to explain why she did what she did. But the court said, well, it doesn't matter because it's not legal here. And so for you to argue to the jury, yes, but it's legal where I came from, is irrelevant. And that right there is probably one of the things that more people are to comment on than anything else. Because shouldn't you at least let the jury hear this? Because otherwise they think, well, this woman is driving around in marijuana in her car. Wouldn't it change things if they knew that, well, she has it because it's legal where she came from and she's using it for medicinal purposes and a doctor has signed off on this and so has the Arizona Department of Health Services? That go a long way towards explaining her intent. And of course, intent is an element in many crimes. And so jurors often wonder, why did they do that? And they'll get hung up on that. And there's nothing wrong with that. Because I think that, I've talked about this before, that you can sometimes tell what people are thinking by their actions. So someone who's driving through town with contraband in their car, if they're planning on selling it to other people, well, that might be a very, very bad thing if selling it is illegal in that area, right? But if I'm driving through town with a small amount of it that's for personal consumption because I've got a medical condition that's been diagnosed in another state, That's a whole different thing. But the court's basically saying, hey, look, it doesn't matter. The point is, it's still illegal. So she was not allowed to make that argument in front of the jury. Key to her appeal is an Iowa law that makes it illegal to possess a controlled substance unless that substance was obtained directly from or pursuant to a valid prescription or order of a practitioner. Now, to get her card in Arizona, she had to present a doctor's diagnosis and attestation that she was likely to receive therapeutic or palliative benefit from the medical use. In front of the Supreme Court, her attorney argued that that constitutes a prescription. But none of the justices agreed. They're sticking to a very, very narrow definition of what a prescription is. The dissent wrote that the registration still meets the threshold set by law. A healthcare practitioner's certification that an individual has a medical condition that would be alleviated by marijuana and that authorizes the individual to obtain a card to purchase marijuana for that medical condition meets this ordinary and common understanding of a healthcare practitioner's order. However, the majority sticks to the narrow definitions here and drew on how the word order is defined in other Iowa laws, saying it only applies to a controlled substance being directly dispensed by a practitioner to a patient or a medication order for the administration of controlled substances in the inpatient or institutional health setting. So the Supreme Court of Iowa is saying we've got harsher and stricter standards here in Iowa. And those harsher and stricter standards were not met by what happened in Arizona here. In addition, they wrote, it is not the doctor's order, but Arizona's registry card that permits the woman to purchase the marijuana. And Iowa's statute has no exception for drugs possessed pursuant to the order of a state entity. The dissent's argument is comparable to providing a complete credit card application to a store clerk rather than an actual credit card when trying to purchase something. It is the credit card that enables the purchasing of something, not the completed application, she wrote. So the dissent pointed out that the law that she was charged under does not say anything about an inpatient or institutional setting, and notes that other Iowa laws use a similarly broad definition of a doctor's order. And the extent different laws conflict on the interpretation of the term, he wrote, the court should interpret an ambiguous term in favor of the accused and reverse the charges. Court records show that the woman was sentenced to 2 days in jail. Those were suspended and 1 year of probation. But of course, it'll be on her record. Now, her attorney said in an email, the significance of this case goes beyond out-of-state travelers, and it's not just simply about possession. She says the same logic could be applied to the state's impaired driving laws, which make it a crime to drive or even sit behind the wheel of a running vehicle with any measurable amount of a controlled substance in their bloodstream. That's a problem for medical marijuana in particular, since traces of it can remain in the bloodstream for weeks. She said, under today's decision, Iowa is hostile ground for any medical marijuana patients traveling with their needed medication. Driving through Iowa within days, weeks, or perhaps months of using makes these patients into criminals. So long as legal users are not impaired while driving, they should not be considered and treated as criminals, she said. And they shouldn't be barred from driving because of the drug that enables them to function. She went on to say the medication that allows them to function should not be what prevents them from doing daily activities like driving. Iowa's laws surrounding marijuana possession and use are simply unacceptable to rational Americans. I hope the Iowa legislature straightens out its priorities soon. So there you go. And this is going to be a problem across the country because of the way that these laws are being passed for medical use and so on. And we've talked about this before. The feds still say it's a no-no. But they're not really stepping in and doing anything about it when states say, okay, we're going to allow it. But there's some weird issues about, people selling it, what they can do with their money, banking and so on. But here's the thing. Woman has a card and can legally use it in her home state. She travels to another state where they have different standards. Now she's got a conviction on her record. She could have spent 2 days in jail. And there you go. So there is not a bright line answer on this, because this is a great example where there's 50 states. They all have their own legal systems and Supreme Courts and court systems. There's the federal system. And unless the feds stepped in and said, let's make this uniform somehow, or unless a bunch of states got together and decided to do something uniform here, it's going to remain like this. And by the way, in case you're curious, what I'm talking about with the states stepping in and doing something together, I've mentioned many times the Uniform Commercial Code, the UCC. And what happened was the UCC was drafted by an institute that thought that they should come up with a common set of laws involving commerce. So they drafted the UCC, put a ton of work into it, and then brought it to various states and said, you guys should consider adopting this as the law because it'll straighten out a lot of things in your state, and also it'll allow people in other states to understand what the law is, because a lot of contract issues are state law issues. But if contracts differ wildly from state to state, how does somebody in Arizona know what the law is in Iowa? And if they're dealing back and forth between the states, for instance, which state governs and which rules we're going to use? But with the UCC being adopted uniformly, you now have it where I know what's going to happen with respect to certain terms in a contract under the UCC, and it doesn't matter if I'm in Michigan or Iowa or Arizona for the most part. There are minor distinctions between the UCCs from state to state, but they're often trivial and they're rare in that sense. But someone could get together with the interested parties, the stakeholders, as they say, and say, let's make up a uniform set of rules and see if we can't get the states to adopt them. And over time, if enough states adopt them, you won't run into problems like this. Because I think most people would have assumed that if it's legal where I am, I've got the paperwork to prove it, and I acquired it legally, and I need this for medical reasons. If I travel to another state with it, I should be okay as long as I bring my paperwork. It's kind of like traveling with prescription drugs. If you're traveling with them, you might get stopped, say, what is this? Is this yours? Oh, your name's in the bottle. Okay. But everyone assumes that, well, that should be okay, right? No, it's not okay. And it won't be okay until, like I said, uniform laws get adopted or more states start taking a more lenient attitude towards treating people from other states traveling to their state with their medicine. So William Morris wrote this, the Des Moines Register. Cody sent it. Thanks a lot. It's an interesting story. Arizona medical marijuana card does not allow a woman to possess the drug in Iowa, according to the Iowa Supreme Court. Questions or comments, put them below. Let's talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law. It takes thousands of bolts to hold a vehicle together, but just one nut holding onto the wheel to tear it apart.